Okay, so Westcon-Comstor, you fairly recently published Mastering the Maze report, and that's focusing on, I think it's a global sort of survey report on channels, sort of journey with cloud today. And I think the main finding seems to be that your partners want to, I mean, I guess it's further developed because I guess most of them are somewhere on their cloud journey, but they're very keen to, develop their cloud capabilities. So just, I guess, talk us a little bit through that high level finding, and then we'll drill down a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right. We surveyed almost 900 partners across 8 different countries. And as you said, 85% of those partners we spoke to see developing and evolving their cloud practice as an absolute priority. Some countries that goes higher. So if you look at the UK, that was up at about 93%. And I think what we've seen is that cloud has just changed the way that partners operate. It promises endless opportunities. There's opportunities for growth, innovation, agility. But with these opportunities comes challenges, right? It's not straightforward. And we're seeing end users look to partners more and more to help them overcome it. I think we've moved on in the market. So it's not just about those entry-level cloud skills. And, we've seen in this report, specialized skills. We've seen, the demand for cloud skills has never been higher. But what we have found in this report is that many partners are struggling to keep up. We found the channel facing significant barriers to entry, both in terms of getting the right people in, but also the cost of getting the right people in. And that's obviously a blocker to helping partners seize the opportunity in the cloud. Many partners are still developing their own skills as they work to really meet their customers' requirements. But I think the good news is, and what we've really found from this report, is there is a determination and a plan to upskill the talent force and really move forward.
Okay, so in terms of that skill set, I mean, how much of an issue is it? I mean, is it literally an obstacle? They're wanting to do things with cloud and they just don't have the skills, or they've got a plan and they think they can acquire the skills at the same rate as they're looking to develop the cloud, I suppose. Yeah. So is it a barrier at the moment, or is it just something they need to be aware of as they further develop cloud opportunities?
Yeah, look, I think the fact that so many partners have highlighted a gap in their own skills is a concern. But I think, in my view, if you flip that on its head, it's fantastic to see the awareness. Partners are aware of the challenge and they're looking to things like distribution to help that. A lot of partners, as you said, are saying, yes, this is what we want to do. We know there's some challenges, but we are really keen to get there because the prize is huge. Regardless of size, we're seeing that end users are increasingly cost conscious, increasingly security conscious. They want confidence around ROI, security. They want to know what their future costs are going to be. There's so much talk at the moment about the macroeconomic climate. So people are more conscious than ever around costs. And it's getting those skills that's really enabling our partners to go forward. So it's absolutely not a blocker, but it's a big consideration for our partners and how they upskill their talent force.
Yeah, and in terms of other sort of concerns, I think they expressed were around the pricing models. And I know everyone, well, not everyone, but it can quite often be difficult to understand exactly the price you're going to pay for a cloud service. There's the sort of headline cost, and then when you drill down, there's maybe other things to consider. Cloud security, I guess, is another thing people think about, and also just, I suppose, the number of competitive offerings potentially out there. So how much of an issue are those types of things for your channel partners?
Yeah, that's a key question, and it was a key outcome on some of this report. We've got some really good findings that support this as well. So we actually found more than 2/3 of our partners said that whilst customers are looking for specialized cloud skills, only 50% of them are confident in fulfilling the demand. And the remaining 40% we find described a skill shortage as their main challenge. So again, we go back to a lack of people and a lack of knowledge being the fundamental blocker in able to unlock things like pricing models. Because you're right, it's not straightforward. when you tie in pricing models, I think you need to look at the cloud provider programs as well. It's a major challenge. 58% highlighted this as the biggest barrier they face when they're advising their customers on cost optimization. And it's looking at all areas of the business, right? They need to understand what the cloud providers target people on. They need to understand what the services are called. They need to understand what modernization routes look like. They need to understand, the difference between RRP pricing and reserve pricing. It's huge. I think when we move on from cost, because I'm conscious we don't just want to talk about cost today, I think the other barrier to cloud success is meeting customers' security needs. It's absolutely critical. And when we asked our partners what mattered most to their customers when they're looking at partners for cloud, 72% of them said it was cloud security services. We saw really what we expected to see when the priority areas were asked. We saw people talking about data privacy and protection. We saw people talking about security of cloud interfaces, and the age-old problem of identity access management was still high up on the list. What we did see is 40% of the partners highlighted the pressure to outperform their rivals. So they were actually worried about being able to deliver better, faster solutions. That figure was again higher in some of the markets that you would typically see as more competitive. So the UK and New Zealand, where we've got very competitive, vibrant partner markets, we're particularly worried about that. So it's not only being able to provide the security solutions, it's also be able to deliver them better and faster using the right marketplaces that we really see as key to that.
Okay, and in terms of the sort of types of cloud solution, I think the report suggests, and that's maybe no surprise, is that hybrid cloud is the way forward. Everyone seems to have worked out that it's not one cloud fits everybody, every need. It's a variety. So is that an opportunity, or is that again potentially a problem to manage all these different sort of clouds, or how does that play out?
Yeah, hybrid was certainly a big feature of this research report. What we found from our partners is 50% of their customers are choosing hybrid cloud solutions, and only 27% are pursuing full migrations into one hyperscaler. I think what we saw, and certainly the commentary around this report, was that customers are choosing to move cautiously and gradually, especially when it comes to sensitive data. We've gone this far into the interview without really diving too much into generative AI and the data considerations around that. But people are becoming more and more aware of where their data is going, how they're using their data. So there's certainly more considerations now. And what we did see is some commentary that certain customers are starting to feel safer having an on-premises option paired with a cloud offering. I do think we need to consider the way the market evolves as well. We talk here a lot about how partners are currently upskilling, and I wonder whether that shift to hybrid will start to slightly decrease when actually more and more partners are able to offer full end-to-end hyperscaler solutions, because you may well see hybrid's popularity at the moment is also linked directly to where partners focus. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops over the next couple of years as more and more partners upskill on AWS, Azure, and Google. Will that drive hybrid adoption down? That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I suppose to that point, it's interesting in terms of the channel companies that can deliver the cloud. I guess they, broadly speaking, are in two groups. You've got the sort of born in the cloud people, cloud natives, so that's all they've known. And then you've got, shall we call, the traditional channel companies that are now sort of pivoting towards offering cloud services. So, I don't know whether the report indicates, or just anecdotally, you've got any thoughts as to whether there are any particular advantages, disadvantages with either, is anyone particularly well positioned, shall we say, to deliver, or does it really depend on the individual, business plan, I suppose?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the individual business, but I think there's definitely some learnings from this report that we can see. So a quarter of the companies that we spoke to in this report describe themselves as born in the cloud. And another quarter describe themselves as traditionally on-premises focused, but developing a cloud solution. And now one of the things that we see as really interesting is you begin to see two different types of partners with two different very types of value to a hyperscaler here. The born in the cloud partners are much better positioned to go to AWS as an example and look and sound like AWS. They can craft their sales team to the same job roles. They can target their sales team on the same thing. They can understand the programs and they can actually embed the programs into how they go to market. But what we see with more traditional vendors is the breadth and depth of customers, of relationships. So many of our partners that we work with have developed deep, meaningful, trusted relationships with their customers over many, many years. And that's really hard to replicate. And I don't think you can underestimate, how important those relationships, those trusted advisor relationships are in the channel. So what we actually start to see is a combining of the two. We see a lot of born in the cloud vendors delivering services to traditional vendors and helping each other out, because you've got one who looks and sounds and talks the walk really like the hyperscalers, and you've got one who has a huge customer list and a huge background and knowledge of developing these services, and they come together really well actually.
Yeah, and in terms of companies like yourself, the distributors, I think the report is fairly clear that the channel thinks that you have a big role to play in when it comes to helping them deliver. Because I guess you're sort of potentially pivoting, because I guess once upon a time you were supplying, software, hardware solutions, and that's not. And I suppose maybe part two is they've also got a positive view of hyperscalers when it comes to the cloud, which again I think that's something that you can help with. So just I suppose first up, what in general terms, what can distributors add, and then we'll maybe drill down into what specifically yourselves are doing. So.
Yeah, and look, I think there's some findings in here that probably aren't going to surprise you. 46% of the partners that we spoke to highlighted training and enablement as the key area that distributors can support developing their cloud capability. I think when you look at some of the challenges we've covered in this report, things like vendor programs, specialist skills in FinOps, it's evident that the upskilling can provide crucial support from distributors. I also think that things like knowledge sharing are really important, hands-on continuous support and actual day-to-day examples of how to use vendor funding programs, how to co-sell. When you look at AWS, co-selling with AWS is really, really important. And co-selling in AWS is different to what we've seen in a lot of the traditional vendors. So actually understanding how to work best with AWS, how to align ops, how to speak to their account managers, how to embed some of the language into your business so that AWS know what you're doing is really, really important. So I think it's incumbent on distributors to support, to enable, and to empower partners, not just in the traditional way, but also in pursuit of their aims of harnessing, developing their own cloud expertise. In terms of how people view those hyperscalers, this report was really positive, right? It was overwhelmingly in favor of marketplaces in particular. We focus a lot on Westcon on AWS. And actually we found 71% of partners had a positive outlook on hyperscaler marketplaces, which actually I think was a little bit surprising. Generally, depending on who you speak to, the sentiment can come across sometimes a little bit less positive than that. So I think those figures were really promising. 75% of the partners we spoke to saw them as opportunities, not threats. And, that has changed. And we had exactly the same amount that saw them as opportunities, not threats, also saw them as a real potential to grow their business and are already actively using the platform. So 75% of the 900 partners we spoke to already actively engaging on hyperscaler marketplaces. Now, we went on to ask about which marketplace attributes people actually see as key to their business. And I think the top three that came out time and time again were creating new opportunities with existing customers. So actually going out finding greenfield opportunities. It was unlocking access to new markets because it enables you to move quicker, and it was increasing the revenue opportunities. I think the findings really suggest the channel is now absolutely alive to the hyperscaler opportunity. It's here, people know they need to participate, and they know the benefits that it's got to offer. I think the key saying internally at Westcon, for partners using marketplaces, it's all about selling where their customers want to buy.
Okay, and in terms of yourselves specifically, I think AWS is a particular sort of sweet spot for you, and I can't remember the exact thing, but I think you've made one or two announcements about your work with them recently. So perhaps you can just share. Obviously, you've already explained that training and getting alongside your partners is important, but in terms of actual solution offerings, etc., what's going on with yourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a very detailed AWS strategy which covers three core pillars, which we believe empowers our partners to really succeed on AWS. And that is split down into firstly AWS distribution. So as you mentioned, we recently announced a strategic expansion of this. We became an official AWS distributor in Europe, which builds on our existing relationship with them in APAC. This gives us and our partners significant growth opportunities, in more than 30 countries by giving access to these AWS market leading services. What we want to do is utilize our cloud capabilities to help partners build theirs. We talked about training and upskilling the current team. What we really want to do is help partners on board and build a recurring profitable business model, looking at AWS funding programs, building technical expertise, and really enabling their sales team and their technical team to progress. So we've established a dedicated AWS business unit in Europe with a centralized center of excellence. We'll have localized hands-on support, pre-sale support, and these will sit in countries. We'll also have marketing support out there to really complement the partner teams. We'll help with training, we'll help with recruitment, and really help with making data-driven decisions on who they should focus on. The second part of that strategy really looks at harnessing the power of Rebura. So about a year ago now, Westcon acquired Rebura, who are a premier AWS partner, really focus on providing a comprehensive suite of solutions across professional services, managed services, and FinOps. So everything from migrations and modernization through to the latest innovation in data, generative AI, through to 24/7 managed services and helping lead embedded support across AWS. And then I think the third part of that strategy is really AWS Marketplace. We launched this last year. Our AWS Marketplace program is designed to unlock new growth opportunities for partners by providing streamlined routes to transacting on AWS Marketplace. We've talked a lot today about the opportunity, how 75% of partners are positive about AWS Marketplace. Lots of partners are really using it. So what we need to do is enable vendors to scale their AWS Marketplace business. Partners are now able to purchase multiple vendor software products through Westcon-Comstor, through private listings, and sell directly to their customers as part of a seamless end-to-end process. Internally, we've got a concierge team that will guide partners through setting up, training, and enabling their teams, and help you to move with CPPO, which is Channel Partner Private Offers on AWS. I think a recent Canalys report projected that more than 50% of hyperscaler marketplace sales will come via channel partners by 2027. So we're really scaling this program to help our partners meet the demand. We've got a new dedicated team which focuses across Europe that really helps people move their business forward.
Okay, and maybe in just finishing, and I'm sure it's not that easy, but if you were able to characterize the partners that you think are being most successful when it comes to the cloud, building up their cloud offering, etc. Are there some sort of common things you can spot that they're doing as opposed to people that maybe aren't getting it? So I suppose what I'm saying is everyone's somewhere probably slightly different on their cloud journey, but what does a successful cloud strategy, or what are the key things that must be in a successful cloud strategy, apart from extra things they can add? What are the core bits of that strategy?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Everyone is at a different stage of their cloud journey. And I think what this report highlights is that we're seeing a fundamental shift in the channel's relationship with cloud, from the born in the cloud vendors really advancing their offerings through to some of the more traditional partners who haven't had an offering are really starting to buy into this. The ongoing rise of these hyperscalers has made everyone sit up and pay attention now. The pivotal role these companies will play, especially as we move more and more into the AI era, now is the perfect time for partners to sit up and decide to be a leader. So my personal advice would be to listen to your customers, work backwards from what you're really good at and what your customer needs. And that's where to start. I don't think we ever see partners be particularly successful when they try to completely redo their business because they're creating a cloud strategy. When partners are really good at security and networking, that's absolutely what they should take into their cloud strategy. Go to AWS and Microsoft and Google, and tell them that's your superpower, right? We're not trying to reinvent your business. We're trying to give new revenue opportunities on cloud. You've absolutely got to fully lean in to your existing superpowers and get that across. By further developing cloud capabilities and becoming genuine experts in the cloud tied in with core business, I think partners have got an incredible opportunity to continue to add value to their customers, navigating what can be major investment decisions, especially for some of the SMB partners, is a really tough and challenging market. So I think, my one absolute core piece of advice would be to continue doing what you're really good at and evolve the technologies we're offering it in.
Okay, it's been great to chat, and some brilliant insights, obviously, into the report itself and your thoughts on the channel and cloud strategy more generally. So, Aaron, I really appreciate your time today. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.